My name is Brett Clark, and I'm a member of Dr. Watkins' third hour English 102 College Composition and Research class. And I'm going to give you the top 5 to-dos in our class to be a successful student. The first step is to always follow the process. The writing process is a very simple list of steps that help you, as a writer, make the best research paper as possible. The first part is to make a working bibliography. What a bibliography is it's a list of all the resources that you used for your research. And once you make the bibliography, you can move on to the next step. And the next step is to make your note cards. What a note card is it is a fact that you learned from one of your resources. And once you get enough facts or note cards in, you can begin the next step, which is an outline. And an outline is where you group up all your note cards into 5 or 6 different categories, depending on how long your research paper is going to be. And once you group them up into different categories, you make an outline. And what an outline is it's basically kind of a summary, sort of your essay, your research paper. It just gives you an idea of what the 5 or 6 main points are going to be in that paper. And then once you make a well thought out outline, you can begin your rough draft. And what a rough draft is it's basically just like the outline, but instead of making just a few main points, you elaborate on each point and flow from point to point to make your whole stance on the topic true and make the readers believe your side. And once you have a rough draft, you can start going back over, editing, making some changes, or sending it off to friends and having them go over it to make it the best paper possible. And once you've done this step, you have a final draft that is ready to turn in. And that is a very important key that most people miss, is they forget to do the final draft editing part and they just turn in the rough draft and they lose some simple silly points based off simple punctuation or grammatical errors. And then another very important part about the process is you don't skip around. You can't go straight from a bibliography to an outline to a research paper. You have to go bibliography, note cards, outline, rough draft, final draft. The second part of the to-dos is when you get stuck or when you get writer's block when you're writing, always refer back to your thesis statement. What a thesis statement is it's generally the last sentence of your first paragraph, and it gives you a general idea, gives you, the reader, a general idea of what the paper is going to be about, whether it's the stance you stand on, if it's a persuasive paper, or it just kind of gives you a rough outline or summary of what the paper is going to be about, hitting all the main points. And so when you get stuck or whatever, just always refer back to your thesis statement. Number 3, transitions. Transitions may seem like a not very important part of your paper, but in reality they are an invaluable asset because it helps the reader flow from point to point and keep them interested. Because without effective transitions, the readers could either get lost or bored, which in that case they would stop reading your article. But if you have effective transitions, it can keep the reader enticed as you move from point to point and help them buy into your side of the topic if it is a persuasive paper. Or if it's just a plain research paper, it just helps them move from point to point and not get lost in all the information. Number 4, always reread your paper after you get done with it. Because if you don't reread it, you could find yourself making grammatical mistakes, or you could type something differently than you had it thought out in your head, and it could just sound kind of odd. And then when you send it off to your friends to have them peer edit it, one suggestion I have is always have a peer editor that's not really in the same group as you, or doesn't really have the same background. Because a personal example of that is that I did my research paper on playing football in high school, and I used a lot of terms that only football players would know. And then when I sent that off to the peer editor, they were like, hey, what exactly does this mean? And I'm like, oh, I should probably elaborate more on this term. And I did, and in the long run, I ended up making my paper seem more professionally written and seem more believable because I explained everything I said. And lastly, in college comp and research, we use a textbook. It's called They Say, I Say, and it's filled with a bunch of tips or writing templates that can help you make a good paper. And through the tips, it can give you ways to flow from transition to transition, flow from point to point and transition, or it can help you put in some good wording that you may not have thought of on your own, that it thinks of for you, that makes your paper seem, again, more legitimate and more trustworthy. Again, my name is Brett Clark, and I'm a member of Dr. Watkins' 3rd hour English 102 College Composition and Research class. Thanks, and I hope these tips really help you next year.